the whole premise of the Mesoamerican model is that there's two Comoros. In other words, two places with the same name.
That is reaching. In my book, that is reaching so
I
far.
know.
That
I
is
know.
not logical. What I mean, it's not logical because it's not mentioned by Joseph Smith or
I
anyone.
know. I know. But
That is
but you
crazy talk. That's
Well,
that's lunacy. No, it is.
yeah.
Okay, you're an attorney.
Yeah.
If somebody said, I don't think the guy killed that, he wasn't there. Well, we got him on video. Yeah, but I believe there's two. He has a twin that we don't know about.
Okay.
Right? Come on.
All right. That's
You're
a funny
an
way.
attorney. What would you guys do? Everybody would throw that out of court.
Yeah, but I can see
Based
the
on
point.
what? Did you hear somebody talk about the twin?
No. That's the only other explanation.
Well, they were really in a quandary because they recognized all the teachings about Comora in New York, but their model doesn't fit New York. So they have to create this alternative Comora down in Mexico. And that's what Tyler and Taylor did with their fantasy map.
Stop for too long, got to keep going, don't really know where the world is gonna go. I know everybody knows that you can't stop for too long, got to keep going, don't really know.
Do you mind if I read this article by Divine Connection real quick?
No, that's fine. Sure.
Or has that got nothing to do with what we're talking about?
That's just on Twitter, or X.
Yeah, so you sent me this, and I find it interesting. Let me share it here.
By the way, I've got my Phoenicia shirt on here.
Nice.
Yeah, we'll talk about the Phoenicia.
Here we go.
And as you can tell, I'm back in my art studio in Oregon, so it's nice to be home.
Yes.
Looking out here at the ocean, it's a beautiful day.
Bob Jonathan Ross. Neville. Here we go. So what is Divine Code?
It's just a Twitter user, an X user.
Do you want to read this and explain what you found fascinating about it?
I can read it. It says, I recently switched from the Mesoamerican team to the Heartland team. It was a slow conversion. Now, right there, I thought that's interesting because this person frames it as a team. And in a way, it really is a team, I guess. Hopefully, they're friendly teams, not competitive teams. And I've tried to think of a sport where each team tries to help the other team. And I can't think of one really.
But see, I find it just fun and fascinating. It should just be very lighthearted.
Absolutely.
Like, I'm a meso guy. Oh, really? What makes you a meso person? Da 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 da. Oh, really? Well, I'm a hemispheric person. Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, I'm totally Mesoamerica.
Yeah.
Let's go have a salad. That's how it should be.
Well, and I think I've shown this before, maybe not here, but I have a slide where I show people going into a temple at the open house. And above it, I have little balloons above their head. This one believes in Heartland. This one believes in M2C, the Mesoamerica 2 Comoros. I put this one believes in the BYU fantasy map. And maybe another one doesn't know and doesn't care. None of that matters. We can all go to the temple and serve together, right?
That's right. Well, the cool thing about the fantasy map, because my wife was agreeing with you on that, which I'm okay with it because I think what they're really saying is, look, everybody's got a different belief of where it happened. Yeah. So we'll just put this generic map. Yeah. But there are even people that believe it happened in Africa. That's a whole other group though, too. Yeah. So go ahead and read. Okay.
So, well, there's a lot of detail on here. People can look it up, but it's basically the idea that he or she goes through this.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Latin America and the kings and all that kind of stuff. So, that's more of a detailed argument. But the point I found interesting was expressing that having changed from one team to the other, and a lot of people do see it as teams like that.
Now, you sent me, and I know we covered this a little bit, but there are perennial or you could say perennial means like perpetual.
Yeah,
questions, persistent about Heartland ideas.
Right.
So we explained these already. Well, you have terms like land northward and land south.
Yeah, let me go through that.
Let me share it. I've got it right here.
I've got a
Oh,
whiteboard here.
would you rather do the whiteboard or do you want me to
Well,
share it?
it's just a little more interactive.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's
Okay.
do. I like
So
your whiteboards, Jonathan.
here we go. So I've got 3 keys for understanding the Book of Mormon. Okay. The first one is that the land northward and the land southward are relative terms, not proper nouns. And that seems so obvious to me. Some people think they're proper nouns. They're one specific place. But for example, you're in California, right?
Yes.
And I'm in Oregon. So for me, California is the land southward, right?
Right.
If I was in California, Oregon would be the land northward.
Yes.
But if I was up in Washington State, where one of my sons lives, Oregon's the land southward.
Yes.
So it's all relative to where the speaker is.
Absolutely.
And the terms are used at different times in the Book of Mormon. And to me, it's just not a normal use of the English language to consider these to be proper nouns instead of relative terms.
Well, what do you feel about when they talk about a narrow? Where is it in the Book of Mormon where it says narrow neck of land? Oh, we're going to get to that. But then
we'll
a Nephite's journey in a day.
Yeah, well, the next one on here, number 2, is that they traveled on, they used rivers to travel.
Okay.
See right there? So a lot of the discussion in the Book of Mormon is trying to figure out the scope of the land. You know, if they traveled in a day or it took them 14 days, whatever, how far could they travel? And that's one of the things that in the early days of the church, there were some people like Benjamin Winchester, the Pratt brothers, who advocated an entire hemispheric model, that Lehi landed in Chile, Elcamor's in New York, and the land northward was North America, the land southward was South America. That was kind of Orson Pratt's big thing.
He was a hemispheric person.
Yeah. And, you know, in my view, Joseph completely refuted that in the Wentworth letter, but we don't have time to get into that right now. But the point was, as people started reading it and thinking, wait a minute, these are vast territories. You can't cross South America easily, especially without modern transportation, in the amount of time it would require. And that's why John Sorensen, in his famous book, Mormon's Codex, I have it here somewhere, said it's a, well, he even went to the point of saying it's a witless sci-fi movie to think that Cumorah could be in New York. Because he was so obsessed with Central America, that had to be the place. Therefore, New York could not be where Cumorah is. But the point I'm getting at is,
Oliver just decided in his brain that Cumorah didn't come from Joseph. He just decided. Yeah, that's strange, right?
That's what they think. Yeah. Although Oliver Cowdery had.
But what about this day's journey?
Yeah, well, that's where several times it talks about a day's journey. And the question is, how far could you go in a day? If you're walking across a desert, if you're walking through a forest or a jungle in Central America, or if you're traveling on a river, it makes a huge difference what your assumption is, right?
Right.
And so when I first, this all comes out of this little book, Moronize America, by the way, that I wrote.
Yes.
I think we've talked about it before.
And how much is that, Jonathan? Plug it.
How much?
Plug it, baby.
Plug it.
Plug it, baby.
This is what we call the pocket edition. You can see it's only, what is it? 108 pages, because I have a much thicker one. I don't know if I have it here, called Moronize America. That's
I'm charging, I only charge $10 for you to plug, period. You just send me, Venmo me $10 and it's a flat rate.
I should plug it. You know, here's
every
the funny
time
thing.
you plug it, it's $10. You got to Venmo me.
Tell them to bring me my money.
Okay,
that's
here
it.
you go.
No royalties.
Each thing like this, $10.
No.
Well,
per video.
I don't do these.
You can bring it up as much as you want. No, per video. Per video. If you plug something, it's $10. How's that?
Okay. But the point on this is, I didn't write these books to make money. In fact, all the information is pretty much available on my website.
I've given up making money on here.
That's not the point of all this. I just like,
right.
In fact, some of the books I wrote, they were my own private notes. And it was only when I shared with a few people, they said, you need to publish these.
Yes.
That's the only reason I did it. But anyway, getting back to this idea of the rivers, one of the things that had always bothered me about the Book of Mormon in terms of, real life was when Alma and all the people and animals ran off and the Lamanites chasing them got lost. And I thought, all right, how are they going to get lost? Because if Alma was going through a jungle or even across a desert, it would leave a massive trail.
Right, because
Right.
it says Alma chapter 22 verse 32, it was only the distance of a day and a half's journey or a
Yeah.
Nephite on the line. On the
Yeah.
line. Oh, that's by the river. Right?
That's what it seems logical.
That sounds
But I-
like the river.
Yeah, it does. And but that's different than the one I was talking about, because I was talking about how the Lamanites are chasing them and got lost. But how would you get lost if you were chasing, a few hundred people and their animals through a jungle? They would leave a pretty massive trail, right?
Right.
That's when I realized, wait a minute, if they were on rivers, it's easy to get lost.
Well, and if you use that and also the evidence of the line,
Right.
meaning river probably,
Yeah.
then you can almost most assuredly assume that we're traveling by water.
Right. And even I think it was in where was it? Somewhere in Alma where it's in Helaman, where Mormon said that he didn't have time to write about building of ships and all that, all their shipping and their building of ships. So they were building ships and shipping stuff.
Right.
And it makes sense in a North American setting where the rivers were the highways of the ancient world. So anyway, that's just one element.
Well,
But that's
and also Cahokia, I've been finding that fascinating because I mean there are other places like Cahokia all over.
Right.
Okay, so I'm just using this as an example. The Book of Mormon, when it talks about building temples after the manner of Solomon, it talks about timber.
Right.
It goes right into timber and cement. It says
Right.
cement, right? I mean, the Book of Mormon mentions cement, but it doesn't mention it a lot.
Right.
If it did, it wouldn't get into timber. It would get into, and they went and quarried rock,
Quartz stone, yeah.
right?
And in fact, if you go to Cahokia today, they have cement on their picket wood. They cover them with cement.
Yes. But if it happened in Central America, you would probably hear a lot of references to quarrying or
Yeah.
bringing blocks and making big stone blocks. And we built great structures of stone,
Right.
but you
Yeah.
don't see that.
You don't see that. But again, that's one of those, that's a legitimate argument, but it's a lot of those arguments are in the form of, if this happened, then they would have done this. And you can't really make that connection solidly. It's just, again, it's another assumption and inference.
It's funny. Grant Gardner I never asked him back, not because he's a great guy, but nobody cared
Yeah.
about, because they already have it.
Yeah, they have it.
And I'm saying
Okay,
these things just real quick. I'm saying these things here. But that doesn't mean I am 100% heartland.
Sure.
I still consider myself hemispheric right now. Or it just doesn't, you know what I mean? I have to be
Yeah.
non-biased right now.
Right. Well, you recognize multiple working hypotheses.
Right.
That's the easiest way to say it.
I find them all interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And well, the third one, and you mentioned it earlier that I have on my little chart here, is this idea that the narrow neck of land, the small neck of land, narrow neck, narrow passage, they're different terms that mean different things. And that's a really important one, because I would say that probably the top three questions that I get is, where is the narrow neck of land? And my answer is always, it's in Ether 1020, because that's the only place it is in the Book of Mormon. So it's not even in the Nephite narrative to begin with. The other thing I point out is that the term narrow neck of land was a common term in Joseph Smith's day. George Washington and Thomas Jefferson both used it in connection with, they used it in connection with describing the movement of the troops in the Revolutionary War, stuff like that. So there's several narrow necks of land around New York, Boston, the places in the Revolutionary War. And it doesn't mean an isthmus between continents. And yet that's how it's been interpreted by some of the scholars. So if you just look at the common usage, a narrow neck of land could be pretty much anywhere where there's water and land.
So I think what you're saying is it's too easy to assign. It just seems too easy to assign that term to the isthmus or the what do they call it? The it starts with a T. The long
Tehuantepec.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The hot dog blood.
And the Pratt brothers thought it was Panama, So,
Right. Right.
but when you look at how the term was actually used by, say, George Washington, it was like on an island in the Hudson River, that kind of thing. And so a narrow neck of land, or in the Boston Harbor too, it's a narrow neck of land is literally that, a narrow neck of land. Why would they say of land? That's another point. Because commonly in geographical references, a narrow neck is a waterway. If you're going into a harbor, like our harbor here, where I live in Oregon, we have a large bay and the ocean, and between them is a narrow passage where the ships can come in and out of the ocean.
Right.
And that's a narrow neck. We call it jaws because there's a lot of turbulence and boats sink there and stuff. But if you have a big enough boat, you can go all the way through it.
Right.
But that's a narrow neck. It's not a narrow neck of land. It's a narrow neck of water.
So here's in the George Washington to Thomas Nelson Jr., September 2nd, 1777. Let me just read this real quick.
Okay.
I observe you are directed by the governor to pay particular attention to the fortifications. There's another word, right?
Yeah.
That was popular during the time of Joseph Smith and even before his time with Washington. Well, like 50 years maybe. In the state, and that in consequence of that, you propose to garrison Portsmouth. Right? With 1,200 men, and to divide the remainder of what troops you may have among the posts of New York, Hampton, and Williamsburg. Right here. The reason you assign for having a garrison at Portsmouth are good, but I can by no means think it would be prudent to have many considerable stationary force. I'm almost there, I promise. At Hampton and New York. These, by being upon a narrow neck of land, would be in danger of being cut off.
Well, they were in the river, but it was a narrow neck of land in the river.
Okay.
Yeah.
No oceans or anything like that mentioned at all.
That's a great example, and I think I've cited several of those. So, this idea that the narrow neck of land is the defining feature of Book of Mormon geography. You see an hourglass shape everywhere. The fantasy map of BYU shows the hourglass shape. That's all assuming that these different terms mean the same thing and that it's an isthmus between two continents.
Right.
It's a pure assumption. It's taken, it's just imaginary, basically.
Well, and in the area that you think the Book of Mormon took place, how many rivers and lakes are there?
Dozens. It's
hundreds, probably.
Almost innumerable. Well, the main river systems are the Ohio River, which goes through the central United States, divides the north and the south, sort of. The Mississippi River, of course, from north to south. You have the Illinois River, the Missouri River, the Tennessee River. Those are the major rivers. And so
that could have happened anywhere. It could have happened anywhere.
Yeah. And let me see if I had a little summary map, I think, in this book that your viewers, when I show this idea to people, I don't know if you can see that. I'll put it right up by the camera. Can you see that okay?
Yep.
Okay. So that's the basic overall geography of the Book of Mormon, in my view. That the Ohio River was the divider between the Lamanites and the Nephites.
Now, are you also basing that on where they have found mounds and ruins and things like that? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. The archaeology and anthropology all fits this. And I know there's people that disagree with some of my interpretations, of course, but that's never, I don't mind people having different interpretations. I just like people to know that there are a variety of explanations. For me, this one makes the most sense. It's consistent with the teachings of the prophets about Gomorrah and the plains of the Nephites and all that other stuff that we've talked about.
So, I mean, I think we fail to imagine that this could have, the whole Book of Mormon peoples, we don't know how small or how big this was. We know there were 10,000 stripling warriors at one time, which that's a pretty...
Well, 2,000.
Sorry. 2,000. Let me do that over again. I'm cutting that out. I would look like an idiot.
I'm teaching seminary and I just said 10,000.
I'm going to redo that.
Okay.
So we know that there were 2,000 stripling warriors at one time. That's not a big army, really.
No. If there were millions of people, it would not be a significant army. But it would be significant if there were only a few, maybe 100,000 or so.
Right. So
Yeah.
we're saying there's people all over North, Central, and South America at this time when Lehi gets here.
Mhm.
Maybe Laman and Libby will marry out of the covenant. Maybe they're marrying natives.
Right.
Or whatever. I'm just hypothetically putting it out
Sure.
there. This could be a group with their record that was isolated from others and just had their own family feud.
Suppose you just wonder why I don't kill you straight away.
Because you know it ain't right.
In a very
Okay.
small geographical area, right?
Right.
For a
Yeah.
1,000-year period.
Yeah. That's right. But, you know,
And
we
they
just
happen to be Israelites. They happen to be Israelites.
well, in our Come Follow Me, we just read from Second Nephi, right? Where, and I'm just going to quote this. I pulled it up here to quote it because this is where Lehi said, "It is wisdom that this land should be kept as yet from the knowledge of other nations. For behold, many nations would overrun the land, that there would be no place for an inheritance." And when I read that, I think, okay, a nation didn't say kept from the knowledge of other people, just says
Right.
other nations. So in my view, that accommodates the actual archaeology in the southeastern United States, because around 600 BC, there were hunter-gatherers there, but there were no Mayan civilizations or any other civilizations that would constitute nations. They were hunter-gatherers. And that's why, as I've explained in the book here, that when Nephi landed, he says he took his family, his sisters and his family, and all those who would follow him. Well, who were the other people? Had to be local people, but
Yeah.
they were not nations.
Right.
And Lehi said, if many nations would overrun the land, there wouldn't be a place for an inheritance if they landed in Central America.
Right.
So, but that, again, people disagree about that, and that's fine. I'm just saying that for me, it makes more sense to read what Lehi said and relate it to the archaeology and anthropology.
Now, according to Heartland Theory, where were the Jaredites?
Well, there's the Jaredites. We know that the ones that Moroni wrote about, at least, were in this North Country, he said,
Okay.
which was around New York. Because remember, when Moroni first came to Joseph Smith, he told him the record was written and deposited not far from his house. So it was written around New York. And he talked about the people in this North Country. So where Moroni was writing the account of Ether was in the same place where the Jaredites had lived. At least the ones that he wrote about. And there's some debate. My view is that the Jaredites and their friends expanded throughout the Americas. And it was only the ones that was Ether's ancestors, a small branch of the Jaredites, that were in the New York area. But it didn't, when Moroni specifically said people in this North Country, he wasn't talking about the entire hemisphere. Right. Yeah.
Let me read some stuff that you sent me here. So we have, this is interesting right here. Kirk Magleby. Did we talk about that?
No.
Kirk Magleby. Huh?
Well, go ahead. Go ahead and read it.
Kirk Magleby pointed out that their models assume that there are no two sites that share the same name. If there are, it blows their models out of the water. What do you mean by that? That there are no two sites?
He did first off, let me mention Kirk is an awesome guy, great scholar, and just a tremendous individual. I really like him. He did an interview with the Stick of Joseph, I think it was, where he explained his whole Mesoamerican scenario. He has a blog that he updates with evidence to kind of confirm his Mesoamerican bias, which is great. It's a very interesting blog and so on. But he pointed out that they're a complex model. And if you go to the Book of Mormon Central website, you can, under their affiliates, they have a Spanish language one, and they have a detailed model of Mesoamerica in there. And that whole model identifies every town, every location in the Book of Mormon. But it's all based on the assumption that no two cities share the same name. And during the interview, they asked him, well, what if two cities do share the same name? Then he says, well, that'll blow our model out of the water, because then there's no rational basis for identifying a location. And yet their whole assumption the whole premise of the Mesoamerican model is that there's two Comoras. In other words, two places with the same name.
That is reaching. In my book, that is reaching so
I know.
far. That
I
is
know.
not logical. What I mean, it's not logical because it's not mentioned by Joseph Smith or anyone.
I know. But
that is
but you could-
crazy talk. That's lunacy. No, it is.
yeah.
Okay, you're an attorney.
Yeah.
If somebody said, I don't think the guy killed that he wasn't there. Well, we got him on video. Yeah, but I believe there's two. He has a twin that we don't know about.
Okay.
Right? Come on.
All right. That's
You're
a funny
an
way.
attorney. What would you guys do? Everybody would throw that out of court.
Yeah, but I can see
based on what? Did you hear somebody talk about the twin?
No, but that's the only other explanation.
Well, they were really in a quandary because they recognized all the teachings about Cumorah, New York, but their model doesn't fit New York. So they have to create this alternative Cumorah down in Mexico. And that's what Tyler and Taylor did with their fantasy map. They put Cumorah down kind of near the narrow neck of land down in Central America, even though they tried not to show Central America, but it's based on that interpretation.
I always come up with good stuff. I always do. The twin theory, the twin that murdered, he's on CCTV, but our hypothesis, our theory is that he's got a twin. Well, do we have birth certificates? No. But that's the mystery. Sorry.
Okay. But we're laughing on not to be disrespectful. We're just
no.
It really, for people with a certain mindset, the two Cumorah theory just doesn't make sense.
Well, no disrespect. It is. I'm sorry, but it is a preposterous. That is not good scholarship to me.
Yeah.
That is
well, they rationalize it. They have a whole, they
rationalize a lot of things, and then they bring up scholarship a lot. But anyway, I digress.
Okay. The reason I brought that up is that the inconsistency between saying your entire model is based on the premise that no two cities have the same name, and yet the bottom of the house of cards is that there's two Comoras.
Right.
It's kind of silly. Okay.
Okay. So go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you go. You go. You're the host.
No, you have more to say about Magleby?
No. He just said he's a great guy. We love book.
Were you going to get into numbers? I know we got into that a little bit, but I find this fascinating. Which one of these? The text never says or implies that millions. We just brought this up a little while, but I want to get in more in depth with this just for a second.
Yeah.
The text never says or implies that millions of people died at Cumorah or even hundreds of thousands. Which one of these links that you sent me would be the best that I could bring up?
Well, they all approach different points of it. Let me just summarize it real quick, because in the interest of time. So the idea is, critics say there's no place in the world where 2 million people died in a battle. And that would be just outrageous to even think of that as being possible. And the response is, well, the Book of Mormon doesn't say 2 million people died in Cumorah either. So it's a mismatch. What it does say is that Coriantumr was, after he had been, encountered Ether and all the prophecies, he reflected on the 2 millions of his people who had been killed. But this was years before Cumorah.
Right.
And in my view, he was reflecting back over his entire history. Other people think it was over more recent.
Yeah.
And so by the time they get to Cumorah, Ether, and this is just amazing when you reread it, Ether itemized how many people died each day for the last 3 days of the week-long battle. And it was in the tens, not tens of thousands, in the tens. And so I did a little spreadsheet. I extrapolated backwards, and that meant that at the beginning of the week, there were less than 10,000 people there at Cumorah, assuming the same progression of numbers. And when Oliver Cowdery wrote about this, he said there were thousands of Jaredites and tens of thousands of Nephites and Lamanites. And to me, that indicates that there were not even 10,000 Jaredites there. And that completely changes our understanding of the Book of Mormon, because that's what the archaeology in Western New York shows. I've talked with an archaeologist out there, and he told me there's dozens of Hopewell sites in Western New York that came up from Ohio. But there's museums out there, and private farmers have collections of weapons, stone weapons that were left in and around Western New York, including the Cumorah area, that were not hundreds of thousands of them, but there are some, right? Which is what we would expect if there are less than 10,000 Jaredites killed there 2,000 years ago. And then for the Nephites, it's a little more of a literary analysis, because Mormon and Moroni said they each had their 10,000, and you think, how many were in the 10,000? And I've been trying to, at least in my view, that means it was a military unit, not a specific number. It's not like Mormon would have said my 9,998 if two of them had died, right?
Right.
He just says my 10,000, like my battalion. And there's another example from history that I've talked about, which was the Anabasis.
2,000.
What's that?
2,000.
10,000. This was 10,000. 2,000 was the stripping warriors. Mormon and Moroni talked about their 10,000.
Oh, right. Sorry. I sound like an idiot again. Wait, I got to redo that.
Okay, we can do that.
Marker.
Oh yeah, totally. The 10,000. Okay, there you go.
Yeah, 10,000 was but still 10,000 isn't that big, right?
Well, but if you had 23 of them, that's 230,000. So,
Okay,
let me walk people through this. Yeah.
Okay.
Because and everybody can look at Moroni or Mormon 6 and read through this again. But it says that Mormon and Moroni from the top of the hill could see their 10,000 each. But when it says 10,000, that's not an enumeration, it's a military unit.
Right.
And that makes it clear that it could be any number, presumably far less than 10,000.
Almost like saying several.
Yeah, it could be, but it's most likely a military unit, right?
Right.
And I started to say that Xenophon, an ancient Greek soldier, wrote a book called the Anabasis, where he talked about his march through Persia and stuff. And he talked about his 10,000. And they roughly had, as I recall, 3,000 or 4,000 left by the time they ended their campaign, even though it was called the 10,000. And so you could have a military unit decimated down to, 9, 8, 7, 6, all the way down to maybe 1,000 people as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they
Satan
said,
calls his third.
Okay.
Sorry.
But Mormon specifically said, I just pulled it up here to look. He says, it came to pass when my men were hewn down, yea, even my 10,000 who were with me. So, but we don't know how many that was. Whether it was,
and also, if you go back to ancient language, the Roman general, right?
Yeah.
Maybe using the same terminology that Moroni is using.
Sure.
Right. Was that Helaman or Moroni? Wait, that was
this
Moroni.
Is Mormon. Is Mormon actually was talking about
the same use? Okay, let me say that again. The same terminology Mormon might be using that the Roman general did.
Well, the example I gave was a Greek, but
Greek,
the point is that even the Romans did the same thing.
Let me say that again. I'm going to look dumb.
Okay.
Hold on.
You are really dumb, for real.
And maybe Mormon is using the same terminology that the Greek general did.
Right. Exactly. And ancient armies commonly would call organized people by a group of 10,000. It's ubiquitous. I think I researched it once. I think even the Chinese armies did that.
Right.
So, but it meant a unit. It didn't mean an enumeration. And that's where a lot of people have gotten confused by Mormon 6, because he talks about these other 10,000 who had fallen, and he had all these other generals with their 10,000. And everybody assumes they were all circling the hill Cumorah, which adds up to 230,000.
Right.
But when you think about it just briefly in the context of history, there's two elements to this. One is 10,000 doesn't mean 10,000 people. It means military units. Second, Mormon had been a general since the age of 14. And in my view, he was looking back at all the generals and all the wars he'd been in over his career. If not that, all the wars and battles leading up to Cumorah. Because remember, the war started, and they were in continual retreat time after time. So they were getting wiped out all the way from Ohio up through the corner of Pennsylvania to Western New York. And so by the time they got to Cumorah, the only ones he said he could see from the top of the hill were his 10,000 and Moroni's 10,000, which could have added up to, just a few thousand. Now, it turns out that Oliver Cowdery said there were tens of thousands there, but that included Nephites and Lamanites combined. So it could have been 20,000, maybe 30,000 died there. But by analogy to that, in England, there's a thing called the Battle of Hastings that took place. I don't remember the exact date, but it's a few hundred years ago. But the Battle of Hastings purportedly had 10,000 people that were killed. And despite all the archaeology that's been done in England, they still don't know where that battle took place because there's no evidence of it other than the historical record.
Well, I was just going to bring that up. When you look back at armies that like destroyed the Jews at times when they drove them out of Jerusalem, go back to every time they built the temple, it usually happened right after they built the temple. Well, we only have Solomon's temple and the one that was built under Cyrus, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe waiting for a third. But the armies always wanted to destroy every bit of evidence that it was almost like maybe the Nephites were almost like anti-Semitism when you think about it. Let's destroy everything.
You mean the Lamanites?
The Lamanites, what I'm saying, the aggression against the Nephites could have been just mirroring the Syrians coming in and or the Romans just destroying anything and everything had to do with anything Judaic.
That's a really good point.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it even says several times, at least in Enos and in Moroni, that the Lamanites want to destroy all the records.
This is a Christian persecution, destroyed everything. Go ahead, sir.
Well, it's like the Islamic thing where they were destroying all the Buddhist statues. Remember that? They were dynamiting them.
And you won't find anything unless you dig and maybe find artifacts. But most armies that have a hatred for their enemy do not want to leave any evidence of them even existing.
That's right. That's right. It's good. That's a really good point.
I know. I do it all the time.
Well done. Anyway, so that's
wait. The evidence room. But also the wood. Heavenly Father could have wanted them to build things out of wood so that we would go by faith too. Who knows? I don't know.
Well, the bottom line of all this is, to me, the existing and known archaeology, anthropology, geography, geology, all the sciences corroborate not just the Book of Mormon, but the teachings of the prophets about Cumorah. And to me, it's awesome. In fact, the more I learn, the more it corroborates it.
Yeah.
But I know the guys at Book of Mormon Central that focus on Central America feel the same way about their theories, and that's fine with me too. I'm hoping that everybody can arrive at a point where we can have unity and diversity, where we all get together and say, cool, you're a Mazo guy, I'm a Heartlander, let's just go to the temple together and serve in the bishopric or whatever, with no animosity, because there's the whole idea of contention is based on this insecurity that comes from wanting other people to agree with us. Yeah. If it wasn't for that, there'd be no contention whatsoever.
But I'm not singing Kumbaya with you. I will not do that.
Good.
I almost thought you were going to say, and get together and sing Kumbaya, and I was going to cut you off right there.
Well, I don't usually use the Kumbaya thing.
I'm joking.
I know.
All right. Well, is that it, Jonathan?
Well, we could talk more, but I think that covers the thing I wanted to make sure we covered is the basic origin of let's say the contention about Book of Mormon geography, which is the Cumorah issue, but the foolishness of contending about it, because it's just differences of opinion, and nobody's view of Book of Mormon geography should determine their faithfulness in the church at all,
right?
Because it's an ancillary issue.
Absolutely.